What's up, everybody? Trending on Twitter and in social media is an article in various outlets. This one is For the Win, USA Today Sports. Joe Buck and Troy Aikman made fun of costly stadium flybys in a hot mic video. And this is written by Andrew Joseph, whose greatest accomplishment apparently was being in an elevator with Matthew McConaughey. I'm not joking. Check it out. For decades, it's been a regular occurrence. You'll see it when Texas Tech plays 2-4 Kansas in a random October football game. It's that common. And when you get past how this tradition is another instance of the blatant militarization of American sports, it's really tough to ignore how wasteful flyovers are. Okay. Fox broadcasters Joe Buck and Troy Aikman couldn't help but mock the Bucks having a flyover of 4 A-10s, and this is what they said.
That's a lot of jet fuel just to do a little flyover.
That's your hard-earned money and your tax dollars at work.
That stuff ain't happening with Kamala Biden ticket. I'll tell you that right now, partner.
3, 2, 1, fight off.
What's up, everybody? It's Mover, CW Lemoyne. Welcome back to the channel. I know we usually have the green screen back here, but I decided NVIDIA's got some new software, so I'm trying that out today. Let me know if you like it. Probably going to stick with this for the foreseeable future and get rid of the green screen stuff and kind of go something more natural. But today we're going to talk about flyovers, and I wanted to do a video about this years ago, actually. I wanted to make this part of the Folds of Honor Quick Trip 500 flyby we did over at Atlanta Motor Speedway in 4 T38s. Obviously, as you remember, I had to pull that footage, wasn't able to show it, but the behind the scenes and stuff kind of would give you an idea of what goes on for a military flyby. And I've done many flybys. In fact, as you know, he talked about in the Biden administration, there would be no more flybys. Well, I did several flybys when Obama was president, including leading Homestead Motor Speedway. I've done Dover. I've done military tribute flybys over SeaWorld, flybys over just about everywhere. And they're very common in the military in general. So a couple things we'll talk about. One, politics aside, I don't want to get into partisanship and all that stuff and kind of what they said, because they're wrong. I mean, it's not really, there is no extra cost in how much in that flyover. Those A-10s are more than likely from Moody, which is in Valdosta, Georgia, which is about 180 miles, I think, from Tampa. So they can do that in a round trip, maybe with a tanker even more. So it's not like it was any huge cost or any, special thing. Also, they're A-10s. I mean, they're not an afterburner burning a whole lot of fuel. So, whether it's a waste of jet fighters or whatever, it's kind of irrelevant just because they were A-10s. I saw another article that had F-18s or whatever. So there's a couple things about flyovers. Number one, yes, they are a good deal for the military. And I love doing them. I thought it was awesome to be able to plan and lead, or even just be a part of a flyover. You always have usually some ground personnel that's actually on the field, whether it's on right next to the stage where the person's singing the national anthem, or somewhere close by so that they can help with the timing. They kind of ground forward air controller kind of role. So yes, it can be a good deal, especially if you get to go to the game after. Is it a waste of money? Well, to say it is, and to say, well, how much did you pay for the flyby of the Super Bowl? You didn't pay anything. That's just not how defense budgeting works. So typically when Congress passes a budget, or they do, if you can get them to pass a budget, usually they just pass an extension or a continuing resolution or something. They don't actually pass a new budget. But the money is allocated prior to 1 October the previous year. So the flyover that happened Sunday, that money was already allocated last year. And it is part of what's called a flying hour program. So in the Air Force, squadrons get a certain amount of hours, and those hours are already paid for. So yes, you can break down, hey, it costs $10,000 an hour for an F-16 or whatever number you come up with. Yes, you can break it down hourly and say, well, this flight cost $450,000, as they said about the F-18. However, that money was already spent. It was going to be spent. It's already budgeted. It's already allocated. And we have a certain number of hours we have to fly every year, both for proficiency as pilots, but also as a unit, as a squadron. And those hours change based on, it's kind of a moving target, because you'll have weather days where your weather cancels. So those hours get reallocated later in the year, or something else will happen and they don't necessarily get flown off. So at the end of the year, you may be in a situation, into the fiscal year, I should say, so September, you may be in a situation where, hey, we've got excess hours, we need to fly those off, or we don't have enough hours, so we start flying a little less because we got to make the books match. I mean, it's balancing that spreadsheet there. So the money's already allocated, doesn't cost anything more. And in this case, I doubt there was any even TDY associated. Now, sometimes flyovers do have TDY, which again, there is a pot of money that's a TDY budget, and the squadron has X amount, and if they don't spend it, well, then they're going to lose it. So to go TDY to do a flyover, it's a special request, and they go do it. Typically, though, flyovers are training missions, and what people don't understand is that the act of a flyover is really good training for the flight lead and the people planning it involved, because it helps with time over target preparation, interacting with the ground crew. You have to plan your obstacles, your run-in. There's a lot of external factors that go into it that make you a better pilot. And also, while you're there, I mean, those A-10 guys, if you've watched my DCS videos of playing with the A-10, some of the best training you get is not when you're in a dedicated sortie, but when you're just sitting there and you're practicing. We call it the piccolo drill, where you're just sitting there practicing, okay, here's the targeting pod. I've got the targeting pod on the stadium. I'm going to slew it around, zoom in, make it a sensor of interest, make it a SPI. Doing those things, I got some of my best training when I would go cross country, because it was a time that was kind of low stress, low threat, where you're not trying to keep sight of another aircraft and stay in your block and do all the stuff that you do in a tactical sortie. And you're just sitting there going, okay, like in the F-16, for example, I want to lock this guy up. I would do this mech. This is how I would practice it. So there is training. Anytime you're in the aircraft is good. It is training. I mean, it's not like you're in a car where you're just zoning out, talking on your cell phone, eating something, and you're not paying attention. When you're in an airplane, a fighter, every minute you spend is more experience. It's more practice with the systems, because the systems can be very complicated. So there is a lot of good training. Also, in the flybys I did down at Homestead, we didn't always just do dedicated flights. We couldn't. I mean, you can't just take off, because you'll see in this video where I'm leading a flyby, there are 370-gallon fuel tanks. In the F-16, it's heavy. You're not going to land heavy weight like that. So what we did was we went out prior, took off well prior, went to the airspace, did intercepts, got actual training. So it was an actual training sortie. And then at the end of the sortie, we did the flyover and then landed and went to the race. So yes, it's a good deal, but you're not spending any extra money as a taxpayer. It is not coming out of, if it's not something where, well, hey, we would save this money and the taxpayer gets it. That money was already allocated, and it's just a matter of how it's used and how the flying hours actually happen. Now, there are other benefits besides being a good deal and all that stuff. Yes, in a situation like this where there's not a lot of people in the stands, probably not a great recruiting tool. However, it's still mostly televised. I know there's been some issues with the national anthem, and that's not always televised, but traditionally flyovers are televised. And not only is it a great recruiting tool because, kids look up, they see the fighter, they like it. There's that certain psychological fact to it, but it's also, this is paying you back as taxpayers. This is what your tax dollars have bought. This is your American military. Look what we have. It should instill a sense of pride and patriotism in the fact that, you are in one of the greatest countries in the world that has such a strong military with people that are willing to sign a blank check up to and including their lives in the defense of freedom. I mean, that is, it's just a show of well, here we go. And it's not that big a deal. There are flyovers all the time. And I know it did say, well, there could be flyovers something as small as a college game or something as big as, the Super Bowl, but that's because people put in requests. And if the flying hour program allows it and, it's not a hindrance to the mission, absolutely, they'll do it because we can. I mean, it's still flying the aircraft is still experience for the pilot. So it's not something that, we're going out of our way to go do. It just requires a little bit more planning and stuff like that. So I think in general, yeah, there's a little misperception there. It's not like your car where if it sits, then you're saving money. If you take the bus instead of your car, you're going to save money. These jets are going to fly one way or the other. Not only do they have to fly for the flying hour program, but for proficiency, jets are obviously better. If anybody's ever had a boat or even a small aircraft, you know that if you let it sit, it's going to break more. But if you fly it, it's going to do better and be less costly to repair and to upkeep and stuff. So it's definitely good to keep, the aircraft flying and keep proficiency and get more. And our hours have been cut. I mean, it's, we're not flying as much as I did back when, I first started in 2008. But, like going back to the Kamala Biden ticket wouldn't allow it. That's just false. Unless they're going full blown, destruction of the military and they're just going to defund us completely, that it's not going to change a thing. There will still be flyovers just like there was during sequestration and the Obama. Well, I take that back. During sequestration, they stopped them, not because we didn't have the funds to do it, but because they didn't want the perception. That was a political game. They didn't want the perception of us having the funds to do them because the money didn't change. The flying hour program hadn't changed. They didn't want the public thinking that we could still do flyovers even though potentially nothing had changed and nothing was different. So anyway, let me know what you think. Please don't get too political in the comments. I try to stay as politically neutral as possible, but I saw this and I wanted to address the idea that, these flyovers are just a big waste of money and that, oh, and that was the other thing too. I think that came up with the coronavirus, whether the Thunderbirds and the Blue Angels doing the appreciation flights for I think medical workers, first responders, and all that stuff was a waste of money. Again, it's already budgeted. I mean, they weren't doing air shows, so this was just they just took what got canceled and it went back to doing coronavirus flyovers instead of doing air shows. That it was just a swap one for one. It had nothing to do with, well, we're spending money on this when there's that. See, that's the perception that we were trying to avoid during sequestration, but honestly, I think the reward, it shows appreciation. It shows that, hey, we're all in this together. And I think that was a little bit misunderstood. But no, it didn't cost any extra money. And, when people are like, well, it's $500,000. Well, that money was spent already. Unless you defund the military completely, it's going to be spent one way or the other. So, but please don't do that. We need our military. It is important. So, hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope you're enjoying the channel. We'll get some clips from the interviews. I've got another A10 DCS videos with WAGs, and we've got a whole bunch of other stuff coming up. So, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Excuse me. Oh, no. Oh! About a lot of that. God. Usually fly with the doors off. All Fox 2. Don't be a douche. That's rule number 1. Make them tell you no.